being here today evening. And as you may have heard, we are recording the meeting for anyone who is not able to join us tonight to listen later. My name is Matt Ruggiero. I'm a English as a second language teacher at English High School in Boston, a Boston Teachers Union member, and a member of Citizens for Public Schools. This is our second session in a series on multilingual education in Massachusetts, learning from the past and present to empower future learners. First, to say something quickly about Citizens for Public Schools. We are a statewide public education advocacy organization. Our mission is to promote, preserve, and protect public schools and public education. We believe that all children, regardless of their race, creed, nationality, languages, gender, disability, class, or economic status, should have equal educational opportunity to participate in the civic and economic life of Massachusetts. We've worked on many campaigns over the years, including the 2016 campaign to keep the charter cap no on two. Today, working on yes on two to support the end of the MCAS graduation requirement, as well as the Student Opportunity Act and the Millionaires tax in order to provide more funding to schools. The goals of this series that we are presenting tonight are to understand the current Massachusetts political and policy landscape for multilingual learners, to learn about effective programming for multilingual learners that uphold their native languages and cultures while also learning academics and English, and to discuss the challenges and opportunities of building and rebuilding a bilingual educator pipeline. In our first session a month ago, we focused on understanding the political landscape, the policies and laws that have led to the context of where we are today and the kinds of opportunities that students and families have to access and have influence on those policies. Tonight, we're going to be talking about and learning about what makes an effective bilingual program. And I'm really excited for the speakers that we have here tonight, who are going to share their knowledge and experiences with different approaches to multilingual education, and share about their experiences with existing models. And we'll think about how we can increase access to this kind of programming for more students and communities in Massachusetts. So we'll have a series of speakers who are going to share a little bit, moving from kind of large context to their own personal experiences with the schools that they lead. And then after the speakers, we'll have time for questions. If at any point during the time, if you have a question, you want to write it down in the chat, we'll read them and go through them afterwards as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. I believe that's right. So Phyllis Hardy is Executive Director of the Multi-State Association for Bilingual Education, Northeast, MABE. She worked as a bilingual special educator in a public school and then as equity and diversity specialist for the Education Alliance. Phyllis is a founding member of the Language Opportunity Coalition, which advocated for the Look Act, the Seal of Biliteracy and Bilingual Education, and the Coalition on Equity, Diversity, and Disability. Phyllis Hardy will begin our program by giving us some of the broader context of the Look Act and the range of programs that opens up in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction, and to Lisa for organizing this panel so we can share what we know about bilingual and dual language education with all of you. So I'm also going to mention that this is MABE's 50th year as an organization supporting and advocating for bilingual education. It's something that Danya reminded me to do, so I'll throw that in right now. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to change my slides. Here we go. Whoop, went too fast. Here we go. Massachusetts is a pro-dual language bilingual education state. In 2017, the Language Opportunity Coalition, of which MABE was the founder, advocated for passage of the Look Act. Districts can decide to offer bilingual programs for their English learners. It eliminated the restrictions for a type of bilingual education program in existence prior to 2002, transitional bilingual education. It created the bilingual education endorsement. Today, there are 6 teacher preparation programs preparing teachers for their bilingual license that did not exist before 2017. The Look Act also created the Seal of Biliteracy, honoring students who achieve bilingualism and biliteracy upon graduation. Let's take a look at the different English learner education programs. Programs that instruct in English are called sheltered English immersion. Students enrolled in these programs may be US-born students whose first language is a language other than English, or newcomers, newly arriving immigrants, or SLIFE, students with limited formal education, the unaccompanied minors that arrive in our communities. There are two types of bilingual programs defined by legislation: transitional bilingual education, an appropriate bilingual alternative for newcomers, and SLIFE at the secondary level, and two program models under the umbrella of dual language bilingual education. One-way immersion programs have a homogeneous student population upon enrollment. All students speak the program's partner language, or all students are bilingual speakers and speak both English and the partner language. In contrast, in two-way immersion programs, there's a heterogeneous student population, students that speak the partner language and a different population of students that speak English. The goals of dual language bilingual education are high academic achievement, bilingualism and biliteracy, and social cultural competence. Students learn all academic subjects and the same academic standards as in general education, but in two languages, English and a partner language. These programs are research-based and found to be the most effective for English learners. MABE adds equity, social justice, and critical consciousness as the foundation of these programs. Since the passage of the Look Act, the number of districts and schools implementing dual language bilingual education programs has doubled. The number of districts with these programs has increased from 11 districts in 2018 to 20 districts today. All the districts with dual language bilingual education programs are gateway city districts, or districts with the highest number of diverse student demographics. In 2018, we had 26 school programs. Today in 2024, we have 51 school programs.
Wonderful.
There is an increase in the partner languages of the dual language bilingual education programs. In addition to Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Mandarin, there are also Vietnamese and Haitian Creole programs. Yet still about 96% of English learners in Massachusetts are in SEI programs or programs that instruct only in English. So the question is, if dual language bilingual education is the most effective way to teach not only multilingual students, but all students, why don't all districts provide dual language bilingual education programs? The answer is that it's complicated. There are still many who believe in the traditional approach of teaching only in English, even though we have over 50 years of research that validates how dual language bilingual education helps all students achieve success in two languages with many benefits and the possibility of equitable education for all. We need to acknowledge and address the challenges districts and schools feel that hinders their ability to increase and implement dual language bilingual education well. The challenges districts report today are similar to a survey MABE conducted in 2018. What is different are some of the new mandates that have been passed in the last few years, such as the mandate to purchase high-quality instructional materials. The materials recommended by DESE are curriculum materials written for students in general education who are learning in English, not for students learning to develop biliteracy and learning all academic subjects in two languages. These same materials often do not have cultural references that are meaningful to our culturally diverse and multilingual students. MABE has been monitoring the implementation of the Look Act and advocating for systemic challenges. I will share a few examples of systemic challenges in assessment and staffing for districts. The Dual Language Education School Accountability Workgroup has been advocating for alternatives to monolingual testing, the need for other types of data, and time for student progress to be demonstrated. As a result of this advocacy on alternatives to testing in English only, Spanish MCAS will be offered in the next few years. The recent requirements for assessments for dyslexia is another example of why monolingual testing does not provide accurate results. The initial assessments approved were only in English, but with advocacy and awareness, there is movement towards identifying assessments in all partner languages of the dual language bilingual education programs. We joined the Massachusetts Educator Diversity Coalition to advocate for passage of the Educator Diversity Act. Our contributions to this coalition is offering specific recommendations to explicitly eliminate licensure barriers by articulating and requiring DESE to consider flexible approaches to teacher license. So what we need to do is to continue to inform, connect, and engage with the public like yourselves. DESE provides many resources and support through grants and guidance documents. They have recently hired a senior strategist for multilingual learning and dual language education. With this person, they are finding ways to collaborate with other departments at DESE and with MABE. In addition to work on advocacy, MABE provides different professional learning opportunities for schools and districts. One very successful approach to learning more about dual language bilingual education is to visit the school programs, a pre-conference activity we organize in the month of February. There is more to do to educate communities and families, state and district leaders, legislators, and the business community to change mindset from a monolingual stance to a multilingual approach, from thinking about literacy to understanding what is biliteracy, to continue to build capacity at the state, district, and school levels to identify systemic challenges, remove barriers, allow for flexibility, and identify motivations and incentives to change, to support districts growing their established elementary programs to a pre-K to grade 12 program model, to increase the number of dual language bilingual education students earning the seal of biliteracy. With time, education, and advocacy, we will continue to grow. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction and context. That's really helpful for grounding the stories and experiences that we're going to hear today. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Aradhana Muliambi. She is the Executive Director of Multilingual Education and founder of Language and Equity. She's the former Director of Multilingual Education in both Framingham, Massachusetts and Windham, Connecticut, with over 25 years in the education field, having taught in dual language, transitional bilingual, world language, and ESL. Now she supports schools and school districts with their multilingual programs. Dr. Mudiambi will discuss how programs can move from subtractive to additive approaches, including the differences between assimilation and native language preservation.
All right, thank you so much for that, Matt. Let me pull up my slides here. All right, so I will be talking about moving from subtractive to additive. So before I get started, let's just define what that means. So when we talk about subtractive education is education that intends to, or by default, because we know that sometimes we do things that have unintended consequences, right? But it's education that takes away home language knowledge from our students. So students come into our classrooms, into our schools, having all of this linguistic knowledge in their home languages. And unfortunately, there are programs that really, they don't preserve their home language. Instead, they move them towards assimilation. And programs that do this are our sheltered English immersion programs and transitional bilingual education programs. And I'm going to talk about those two a little more in detail as we keep going. On the other hand, additive programs are programs that intend to add to students' linguistic repertoire. It builds on what students already know rather than taking away. And these are our dual language classes and also our heritage world language classes. And we'll talk about those two in a minute as well. And so this is what is about native language, not just preservation. Okay. So let's go back to, I'm sorry, it's moving a little too fast there for me. So let's go back to this this program that this landscape that Phyllis shared with us. So when students come in speaking a language other than English, by federal law, we're required to test our students and see if they are already proficient in English or if they are at early stages of proficiency. And so if students are at earlier stages of proficiency, by federal mandate, we are required to provide support for students to learn the content, to access the content, and to build their English. And so there are two ways, as Phyllis told us, for us to do this. One is through the English model or the Sheltered English Immersion Program. In Sheltered English Immersion programs, kids are learning mostly in English. They may be provided some supports in their native language, but basically the idea is to focus in on the English. And what I've seen as a director is that students who are in Sheltered English Immersion programs tend to never build their literacy in their home language. And in addition to not building their literacy, oftentimes they become less fluent in their home language than when they entered school. Okay, this is the reason that it's known as a subtractive program. So because Sheltered English Immersion is a subtractive program, people move into bilingual education. And one of those is the transitional bilingual program. And in the transitional bilingual program, students language to begin with. And this is to build their content knowledge while we're building their English knowledge. But the idea is that we transition our students from their home language to English. So eventually we're phasing away their classes in their home language. And so what happens through this? I was a transitional bilingual teacher. I've been a director for transitional bilingual programs. And what we see are kids who are building their literacy in their home language. And then a couple of years down the line, after they've left the program and gone into sheltered English immersion programs, they can no longer read. So they've built this ability, this literacy, but now they no longer have it. And they also start to lose fluency in the language. And transitional bilingual programs were created by Lyndon B. Johnson as a remedial program. So they were never intended to see their home language as an asset. And so again, it's a subtractive model. So the only additive model out here in this landscape is the dual language immersion program, which can be one way or two way, as Phyllis talked to us about. But in both cases, students do really well. So what exactly is a dual language program? So dual language programs are programs that were originally designed for students who Massachusetts labels as English language learners, so students who have a home language other than English and are learning English at school, where students are taught all of the content areas in both languages with the intention of students becoming biliterate and bilingual in both languages. So basically, we want our students to be able to read, write, speak, and listen in both languages at high academic levels. So we want them to be able to do math, social studies, science, to be able to do language arts in both languages. And what I want to emphasize here is that the programs were originally designed for students who are identified as English language learners. And this is really important. As Phyllis told us, there are a lot of benefits to being bilingual. There are cognitive benefits, there are economic benefits, but there's an additional benefit for students who are identified as English language learners. So this graph right here that you see, this is known as the famous graph. This was done by Thomas and Collier. And here on the y-axis are percentile scores for English language arts exams. So these are not exams testing English proficiency. These are language arts, English language arts, ELA exams. On the x-axis, we see grade levels. This dashed line right here represents the average score of monolingual English-speaking students. So half the students who just speak English do better, half don't do as well. It's the average. And all of these colored lines right here represent our students who start school as English language learners and are in different programs. All those programs that we saw in our landscape slide, they're in those different programs. And the space right here between the dashed line and the colored lines are what's known as the achievement gap or the opportunity gap. This is what we're trying to close for our students. And as we see, by the time students get to third grade, we're closing that gap at about the same rate for all of our students, regardless of programs. But as they get older, we start to see that we're closing the gap. So this area is getting smaller for students who are in two-way and one-way dual language programs. We're closing the gap faster. And by the time they're in around sixth grade, we've closed that gap for our two-way dual language program students who started off as English language learners and were in the two-way dual language program. Their scores on average are the same as the scores for monolingual English speaking students. And by seventh, eighth grade, that's the same for one-way dual language programs. And as they get even older, they actually start doing better on English language arts exams. Now, kids who are in the other programs on average never do as well as monolingual English speaking students. Okay, this doesn't mean that they never gain proficiency in English, they do. But on English language arts exams, so they're not getting the language arts skills at the same rate that our monolingual English speaking students do. And this is why our dual language programs are so important. And it's really important to know, I've started one-way dual language programs. I've been a director for both and a teacher in both. And you can see the difference. Students really begin to grasp both languages. So they have all of the content area. They have all of the standards for the content areas, but in addition, they have both languages. And it's really amazing to see that. Okay. We talked about the difference between transitional and dual. I do want to emphasize that one-way and two-way, that students can be successful in both. These are the exact same programs, same curriculum. It's the same, you have to spend at least 50% of instructional time in the language other than English for at least 6 years. It's just who are the students in the classroom that differ. That's the only difference. One more thing that I want to add are heritage world language programs. So when you're building dual language programs, you have to start building from kindergarten. So you'll be building one grade level at a time, generally speaking. And so heritage dual language programs help support the students as you're building the dual language program who are older. And so these are programs that support students with their home language other than English in building reading and writing skills and building their fluency. So for example, world language programs may start with Spanish 1. And so they're learning basic vocabulary that our kids who speak the language at home already have. So this really helps them build on their linguistic abilities. It also can support students from low incidence languages. For example, when I was working in Framingham, we had 63 languages represented. So I started a world language, virtual heritage world language program for our students who maybe 1 or 2 students spoke that particular language or 10 students spoke that language, and they were able to study online their home language. One thing that we should always remember is when we do heritage world language programs, these programs at the high school level should be given honors. We should be giving honors credit because we always want to value our students' home language, and that's very important to do. I know I'm coming close to the end of my time, but I do want to leave y'all with this quote by Mary Ashworth, who is an educator. The roots of the term education imply drawing out children's potential, making them more than they were. However, when children come to school fluent in their primary language and they leave school essentially monolingual in English, then our schools have negated the meaning of the term education because they have made children less than they were. This is really why we want to move our programs from the subtractive model to an additive model. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate our first two speakers kind of setting up the context. We've heard kind of about the sort of landscape of programming and what differentiates dual language from other kinds of programs. Our next speakers are a series of school leaders in Massachusetts who are going to talk about their own experiences developing and growing these programs. And just a reminder, I do see a couple people putting in questions into the chat. As a reminder, we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if you please feel free to write in some questions, and we'll have time at the end to kind of to focus in on those. All right. So our next speaker is Sarah Marrero. She is the principal of the Amigos School, a dual language elementary school in Cambridge. Her journey in education has been marked by a passion for language, culture, and academic excellence. In addition to being a principal, she's also served as an instructional coach, mentoring teachers in effective bilingual instruction strategies, and has served for several years as a board member for MABE. Under her guidance, Amigos has continued as a beacon of educational excellence, both in bilingual education and culturally responsive schooling. And she'll be sharing more about the Amigos School and dual language at the elementary level.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everyone. I will work to share my screen with everyone. Oops. Is that working for everyone? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Let's see. Thank you, co-host.
All set? Okay. Well, good evening. Like Matt said, I'm Sarah Marrero. I'm the principal of the Amigos School. We are a pre-K through 8th grade public school in the Cambridge Public Schools. I'm going to talk a little bit about best practices for dual language, my own school, and then hopefully later on this evening have some time to answer any questions that our viewers have tonight. So let me see here. You saw earlier the 4 pillars of dual language at Amigos. We really have built our school around these 4 pillars. Critical consciousness, bilingualism and biliteracy, rigorous grade level academic achievement, and sociocultural competence. When I think of a successful dual language school, ideally, it would be pre-K through 12. If not, if you can't do that, it definitely should be pre-K to 8. And you can see listed here on the slide some of the components of successful dual language schools. And all of these components at different times over the existence of Amigos have been both successes and opportunities, sometimes called challenges. Right now, I think one of the largest opportunities we have is to really build out the pipeline for qualified bilingual staff, as well as effective language instruction and professional development. That Phyllis mentioned a little bit about assessment and accountability that has had highs and lows throughout the years, and the supportive policies and resources as well have changed throughout the years. And I'm fortunate to have been at Amigos for the last 20 years. So I can speak with a little bit of precision over that time. So Amigos as a public school in Cambridge draws on students from the entire city. We're located in Central Square, but because the Cambridge Public Schools have what they call a controlled choice policy, which for most would be a lottery, We have students from all over the city. In general, you can see our mission here. Everything that we do is seen through, if you can imagine those 4 pillars and then our mission. Everything we do after that, we look through the lens of our mission. It's really important to be grounded, to know exactly what you're working towards, to have everybody who's involved in the schooling process, on that same page with regards to the mission. So we are fortunate. Amigos was founded in 1986. So we have been around for a while. We were a strand initially. We later became our own school. And in 2012, we got our own building, and we've been happy in our own building for the last few years. We have a pretty high demand for the school, usually a wait list for almost every grade level. And that's exciting for us. When you're thinking about dual language, you definitely want to consider your allocation, your language allocation model. And that is highly dependent on the context of the community where the school is located. At this point in time in Cambridge, the model that we are using is an 80-20 model, which means 80% of instruction is taught in Spanish in pre-K, K, and first grade, with 20% in English. I think an important thing to note is that we do offer literacy in both languages from day one, and that does distinguish us from some other dual language schools. But we feel that piece is really important and has benefited our student population for a long time. In grade two, we have a 60-40 model. So 60% of instruction is offered in Spanish and 40% in English. And then grades 3 and 4 is 50-50. And all of those have classrooms that are self-contained. So it's one bilingual teacher who teaches all subjects in each language. So for our upper school model, and Amigos upper school is grades 5 through 8. It does follow a middle school model. So we have core subjects that are taught by a specialist in that content area. So for us, we always have ADLE, Artes de Lenguaje en Español, and then we have ELA, English Language Arts, plus social studies, math, science, and we kind of mix and match the language that those subjects are taught in, as is recommended by CAL, which is the Center for Applied Linguistics, with regards to making sure that students have the opportunity to build their language skills in all content areas, and that those are kind of woven through throughout the grades. I think one of the things that I love the most about my school is that we do have the students for 10 years. It really allows us to build meaningful relationships with our students and their families. And that just kind of ends up benefiting everyone. I mean, certainly the students, their families, but also the staff. There's something to be said when you've really spent a lot of time with a group of students. It also certainly puts a huge burden of responsibility on us, because we are responsible for 10 years of that student's education. Like any other school, we have our school-wide initiatives. We're always looking at our instructional practice, family engagement, social and emotional learning, student achievement. All of these things are parts of any school, and certainly parts of a functioning dual language school. And you can see here some of the different things that we have been focusing on over the years. I think one thing with dual languages, you are always polishing and refining your model to make sure that it is meeting the needs of students and helping them achieve the mission and the vision of the school. I would say one piece that people don't often talk about as much is the power of joy and pride in what you're doing, helping build a language. At Amigos, I often say to the students and the teachers that we are all working maybe a little bit harder than everyone else because we're doing it in two languages, and that's not to take away from all the other hardworking educators, but we have to, recognize that we are constantly, in this world of doing things in both languages. It is super important to celebrate the moments of language acquisition throughout the years. So we have assemblies, we have, school spirit days to really promote the language and the cultures and help our kids understand, why they're here, why that's really important, why that's going to transform their lives and hopefully, the rest of the planet. We try to have guests, be that musicians, authors, artists who look like our students, who can come in and share their craft with our students and inspire our students, because being in a dual language school it's hard. It can be really hard, and sometimes kids, are put here and maybe there hasn't been a conversation with the family about, why. So that's some of the work that we do as we're building out our community. You can see here's our staff. We have a, really dedicated staff. We have all types of organizations and clubs, school song, everything that we can do to really build pride in ourselves, our work, our students. That's really one of the goals that we have. And I think the impact on families is significant. We have amazing families. Typically, or historically, I should say, families have come who are either Spanish dominant, have Spanish as a heritage language, or have English as a dominant language. That's always changing, and because that's always changing, that always requires that we're looking at our design and our instruction. But we want families to be involved. We're close to 100% family participation for conferences and events. We do everything in two languages, from, meetings to parties. I would say some of the opportunities that we have with families, there is still a lingering fear that a lot of recent immigrant families or Spanish dominant families have, when it comes to, English language acquisition. Like, will my child learn English at Amigos? And I'm always like, absolutely they will. And not that I'm going to, tell MCAS, but like our Latino subgroup does fall in the 90th percentile for the MCAS in English. So, that is something that people are definitely getting when they're at school, at a dual language school. And I think I will end it there because I believe I'm out of time. But hopefully if folks have other questions, we can address those later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that we are kind of now getting a chance to sort of spotlight in on school programs and the work of building and growing them. And our next speaker is going to continue by moving up to the secondary high school level. So our next speaker is Danya Vasquez, the head of school at the Margarita Muniz Academy. This is an innovation school in Boston Public Schools, dedicated to preparing students for college and beyond in a dual language immersion program coupled with a focus on the arts. The Muniz is the only dual language public high school in the New England area, and is modeled after the work of the Rafael Hernandez K-8 school in Boston. I'm really excited to hear from Danya about the Muniz and about building a dual language program at the secondary level.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Lisa, and everybody at Citizen for Public Schools for organizing this, and for inviting me and my colleagues around the screen. Let me make sure I can share my screen, and I'm not great at this, so does everybody see that? Am I good? I'm probably on
Yes.
the wrong slide though. Let me begin at the beginning. Everybody good? All right. Let me raise my volume. So it's really been a journey, and I think we're in the middle part of our journey as a school. I started the school back in 2012. And it is, as Matt said, it was really an outgrowth of the Hernandez and working with Margarita Muniz, who was the principal and an icon for many of us around the screen. And the dream, the vision was, can we do a dual language program at the high school? And we have some really unique challenges. I love hearing Sarah talk about the elementary experience. In the high school, it's a really different experience, and we get a really different set of challenges that we have to navigate. And I hope I can speak to some of those. Just to say, this year we welcomed our 7th grade. And one of the reasons we wanted a 7th grade was, again, what's been talked about, like the longer you have kids, the better we hope we can do in the language learning, and also just not just the language learning, but just all of the academic learning in all ways that we educate our young people. So we have our new 7th grade. We also added a SLIFE program this year in the 7th grade. So we're on a steep learning curve around working with middle school kids all the way around. We have an alumni support program, and really we promote deep sense of language and culture and focus on developing identity. I often say when I talk about our school that folks are always very interested in the mechanics of how we do dual language. And I always like to remind everybody that a dual language program is really so much about identity and culture. It's about empowerment. It's about asset-based approach to everything we do in educating young people and welcoming families. So it's really more than just how are we teaching both languages. I love this quote from one of my young people. I love the Margarita, as many of them call it, the Margarita. It's a Boston thing, I think. You enter this school and you feel that you have a slice of your country. Siento que tengo un pedazo de mi tierra. And I think that really kind of captures what we're about. Can I get to my next slide? Okay. We are citywide open enrollment, and that is both beautiful and challenging if you're doing a dual language program at the high school. Students who want to maintain and increase their dual language and literacy proficiency are often the kids that end up in our community. We often ask ourselves, and of new families, do you understand what you just stepped into? Because it is an open enrollment community. So sometimes it's an important question to ask. And largely people say, yes, I know what I'm getting into. Every year we have one or two kids or one or two families that feel like, I'm not sure this was the right fit for me. But largely our families are coming because they're eager to have their kids learn in both languages. Our demographics are what you see there. 80% first language, not English. About 50% who are English learners. That 13% of students with disability is now 16%. That was as of the summer. We are now at 16%. And we have 95% of our population is designated as high needs. So it's a pretty complex picture of who we are serving. Again, another slice of who we are, sort of seeing who we are. I won't go through those numbers, but I think it's important to name who we serve in a high school model where we're up until this year, we're inviting kids in ninth grade and trying to do this long arc of learning in a very short amount of times. And at the high school, we also receive kids in 10th and 11th grade, and you have shorter amount of time to try to do this like arc of work that really takes 5 to 7 years or more. I'll just do this quote real quickly. You can be who you want to be here and no one will judge you. The teachers treat you as one of their own kids. And I think that is sort of a beautiful sentiment around a dual language high school. And I think any high school, I don't think you have to be a dual language program to generate that kind of feeling, but I do think that some of it comes from the real deep attention to culture, to identity, and that we're an asset-based program, and that students feel that sense of we're really there for them, and we also have high expectations of them. And so this year in particular, as we're ramping things up even more for our kids, I've heard many of them say, you guys are asking too much. What happened over the summer to all of you? So that's a good thing. We're part of some work with the Bar Foundation, and it's called Portrait of the Graduate. We call it Portrait of the Scholar. And so in the last 3 to 4 years, we've been building out our competencies and our school values. If you are really sharp and you're looking at this slide, there is a mistake in one of the words there. It's misspelled. Integración. It should have been integridad. So that's something I'm just going to call myself out. This work, though, has really been important in really establishing with more clarity the kind of academics that we're focusing on, the kind of learning and expectations when students leave us by 12th grade. And all grades are involved in learning about these competencies and demonstrating these competencies, so that when they get to senior year, this is really their graduation requirement. We all have to do MCAS and everything else, but for us, our kids also have to demonstrate these competencies. We like to call our model city as campus, and we've worked hard and it's not sort of fully there, but I think we're still thinking about how do you use Boston as a campus. Learning can happen anywhere. It doesn't only have to happen in the walls of the building. And so we've worked hard to engage different kinds of partners that our kids go out to, and we're also bringing in lots of community perspective through our experiential learning model, our project-based learning model, where we invite lots of partners into the classrooms to share in that learning. So it is an inside-outside kind of model. This is one of my favorite slides. Dan, you might like this slide. And it's part of one of the challenging slides, and I won't say a whole lot because people probably have lots to ask about this, but we have 4 years of English, 4 years of Spanish, 4 years of arts, and 4 years of math and science. Math, science, and the arts use both languages in a translanguaging model. I think I've talked to Phyllis about this. We've tried all sorts of different models at the high school. It feels a bit different than the way you might construct this at the elementary school level. And so we've landed on a translanguaging model, and we're still, even, I appreciate Sarah's earlier comment that in a dual language program, you're constantly looking at things and refining and asking yourself, is this what's really working? And if it isn't, how do we change it? 75% of our students are heritage speakers, and 25% of our students are learning Spanish as a second language, even though 95% of our students are Latino. And even among the 75% of heritage speakers, there are several students, I would other 10% in there that we push them into that, the native language Spanish class, and they resist because they say to us, I've never been in a Spanish class. Just because I speak Spanish, miss, well, what are you doing to me? And we push them really hard. And I think they surprise themselves on the way because they never had any formal Spanish instruction in their elementary or middle school years. And so this is a really big stretch for a lot of those kids, especially our Boston-born kids who do speak Spanish, but never were in a Spanish language class. And for some of them, there is also at the high school level, some of the value, like, why am I doing this? They're not as bought into it as our students who are English learners, who know they have to learn English and appreciate that we are not erasing their Spanish. They have a different approach to a dual language model than our Boston-born kids who they already know English, right? In their minds, that why am I doing this? So there's always this push and pull around this question. And balancing the student language learning is a key anchor in how we build the schedule for students and our programs. It is one of the key anchors, not the only one, but a major key anchor for how we schedule out things every year. The other side that I'll talk quickly about is, around this theme of portfolios, not exams, is that that tree image that I had earlier. Students have to present quarterly what we call the achievement zone, zona de logros. It's like mini exhibitions, and they have to do it bilingually. And at the end of the year, grades 9, 10, and 11 have to present their full, it's almost like a mini portfolio experience. And the seniors, their exit, their graduation requirement is to present their senior portfolio. And that is higher stakes because it is for graduation. And we invite community folks and parents and other students to participate in those presentations. And so April, May, and a little bit of June are always interesting times for the seniors in our school. But we think that the presentations are really powerful. The younger students do present to each other so that there's some peer learning and peer sharing. And we are also refining this whole process of Zona de Logros as in the quarterly presentations. We do something that we call CREW. It's inspired by expeditionary learning. Everybody thinks about it as advisory. And so that is really important part of our school where students really, they build some special community and have a teacher or a staff member who are really guiding them throughout the year. And I think it is also what makes for deeper connections. We recently had a CREW phone bank event, and every teacher, rather than doing some other kind of traditional thing, every teacher contacted every single CREW parent, the parents of the kids in their CREW, to make that connection and welcome them, in the beginning of the year, and really, give them some early information about their child. And it was like super successful. We reached about 95% of our parents in 2 hours, which was extraordinary. This is, I'm not going to do the little thing because I'll take too much time. There's a little video of our band, but we have a terrific arts program. 2/3 of our kids are in band. We have visual arts, we have piano. The teachers really have figured out a really diverse set of arts programming that every student is involved in for all of their time at Muniz Academy, and it's highly valued in our community, even through budget season. Those are just some of the beautiful artwork that we have. The young lady who is, I think if you're seeing her, she has a blue jacket, was a student, and I think that image is of her as a student. She is now one of our staff members. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. And we just have lots of student life that we've built over time that as any high school is really important. And then we have a really big student and family support system that I feel really proud of and works really well, given all the really deep high needs situations that we find in our community. And so we feel that working with our families is super important. I'm going to end on this slide and sort of the challenges and the wins that have experienced over the years. Staffing and licensing. I feel like I'm always looking for a unicorn, the never-ending unicorn. This sort of to fully resource and staff in order to actualize a dual language high school is elusive. It's really, really hard to, if I had my way, I'd have many more staff and we'd have many other resources. So we're always constantly thinking about budget season and how do we mitigate like some of those challenges. Curriculum alignment, again, I heard it from different folks, it's great to have high quality materials and they don't always satisfy what we need in our programming. At the high school level, the mass core requirement in BPS has been a long and very hard journey to figure out because it doesn't recognize a dual language high school. And so that has been a journey. I think we're almost there. We're about 95% of the way there, but it's been a really hard journey. And our model is really complex, serving a very deep and diverse set of student needs at the high school level. In terms of wins, and I hope you see that I have more wins than challenges. We have a really strong community. I think kids really feel they have or develop a positive sense of self and identity, language, culture, and empowerment. I think it is the thing that people most comment when they come to our community, is this positive sense of who kids are and sort of the positivity in our community. We're creating and have created a college and career pathway for all students. It's a little bragging right that I have when I say that we have graduates who are now staff members. We have about 5. We've had over the years, in total, we have about 6. 2 of them have moved on, but we have 4 who are currently students in the school, went to college, came back, and are now teachers. And one of them today was passing by and she had a little cart. I'm known for my little cart in the building, and I couldn't believe she had a little cart. I said, I can't believe it. Like, you're the next principal. She's get out of here, but it's just a point of pride. And really strong family and community engagement. And I think the last win, and it's a win that I feel personally is so important that I have some, that we all have this, is generating lots of interest in bilingual education, that it's not just like an insular thing at Muniz Academy. And though we're not perfect and we have lots of challenges and there's a lot of things that we need to work on, I think we generate that interest in bilingual education. And I feel that's like a duty that we have as a bilingual school. I think that's my last slide. I will stop sharing. If I can figure out my screen here, stop sharing. Yep, I did it. And so thank you for listening. I hope I didn't go too much over time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We will now go on to our last school leader speaker. Dr. Tony King is the head of school at Boston International Newcomers Academy, BINCA. In his 25 years in the Boston Public Schools, Tony has worked as a bilingual history teacher, an ESL teacher, an instructional coach, and an administrator. Much of his work has focused on closing opportunity gaps for ELL and specifically SLIFE students, which stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. The team of educators at BINCA has worked to develop the school into a nationally recognized school noted for improving outcomes for adolescent English language learners. So Dr. King's going to share with us about BINCA and their approach to supporting students.
Great, thanks, Matt. Like everyone here, I need a second to share my screen. Okay. All right. So great to see friends in the space tonight, and always an honor to follow Danya. She and I have been colleagues in this work for a long time. So a great partner to my school. She was actually important in the history of developing BINCA as well as the munis. So we are Boston International Newcomers Academy. Interestingly, we're two things. We're Boston International High School and Newcomers Academy. So we're two separate entities in one way, but we have developed into one school community, which we call BINCA, kind of our brand, and built a community over time. We're singular in Boston as a 100% English language learner school, but part of a larger network that is around the country and especially on the East Coast, a group of schools called the Internationals Network. So there's about 31 of these schools all over the country. Again, most of them are in New York City, and they all serve specifically English language learners who arrive in later grades. Almost all of them are high schools. Some include a few middle schools. They are very different than the international school in Paris or in Dublin or in other places. Sometimes folks reach out to us from around the world and saying, oh, we're moving to Boston and we saw an international school and our student is currently in one. It's not that kind of international school. So the history of BINCA somewhat reflects the history of what's happened around bilingual education in the last 20 years or so in Massachusetts. For folks who've been around for a while, you'll note that the year that Boston International opens is not a coincidence. So that's 2003. And that followed a much different question too. I know most of the folks on this call are probably voting yes on this question too, but maybe no on the question two that passed in 2002 and for the time eliminated bilingual education in Massachusetts. So there was a group of us in the central office at the time who really wanted to do something to ensure that students in this moment of transition would still have places that would feel as special and incredible as many of the bilingual departments and bilingual programs had in the city of Boston during the time of bilingual programs. And so we went and visited some international schools in New York, and then the following year we opened up Boston International High School, which at the time was in a really small building over in Jamaica Plain. Started with fewer than 10 students on day one, and then grew to about around 150. And then several years later, for a somewhat different reason, we got back together and wrote another proposal, this time for Newcomers Academy. And the Newcomers Academy was meant to be a place for late arriving English language learners to come if they arrive at points in the school year when typically other high schools were already full. And importantly, the other part of Newcomers Academy was to have a SLIFE program that was at scale. In Boston at the time, all of the SLIFE programs had been connected to TBE programs, which no longer existed. And so each SLIFE program felt like a little island in certain ways. There was typically one SLIFE teacher, maybe two, in a building, and it was hard for those folks to build capacity when there were they were isolated in that way. And so part of our plan with Newcomers Academy was to have a big enough SLIFE program with enough languages that we could learn from one another and really grow a program where SLIFE was at the center instead of at the margins, which is where it was in most of the schools that we were familiar with. And so over time, Boston International moved from its home in Jamaica Plain and co-located with Newcomers Academy in Dorchester. And then it made pretty good sense to combine the two under one leadership structure, which happened in 2010 with the principal who preceded me, Nicole Bonham, a real visionary and amazing educator. And she combined these two schools into one, and we became Boston International Newcomers Academy and BINCA. So our model is English and content. So unlike the programs that you've heard about tonight, our program is, I guess it would fall on the SEI side of the matrix that we were looking at earlier. Everyone at BINCA is an ESL teacher and a content teacher. So if you're a math teacher at BINCA, you're teaching math, but you're also teaching English. If you're a science teacher, same thing. And so that's an understanding when you join our community that you're not joining the community to teach a specific content area only, that you are sharing in the work of making sure that our students learn English at a high academic level on the really short runway that they have. One of our strengths is our shared sense of community. I think folks heard Danya talk about the Muniz and the sense of community they have there. We have a similar strong sense of community, and we do a lot of work very intentionally to celebrate our students and our families. There's a lot of fun stuff happening at BINCA, and it's fun and it's on purpose. We also have a lot of expectations for the ways that our staff communicates with students and families in ways that are going to embrace their identities and make them feel at home. And we hear that over and over again from our families, that BINCA is like their second home, students. And it makes me really proud when people come to the school and say that our school just feels different, and they can feel it when they walk in the door, because it's taken a team of work, a long time to create the sense that we have there. Another thing we're really proud of is our focus on SLIFE and then former SLIFE students. So we have the district's largest SLIFE program. A little over 100 of our students are SLIFE, and then another big chunk of our student population are former SLIFE students who've exited the SLIFE program into the SEI program. It's really at the core of our work. It's really challenging work to meet the needs of students who bring complex learning needs, and many of our SLIFE students are working and on their own and facing all sorts of challenges, but they bring such incredible energy, assets, hardworkingness, perseverance into our community that it really helps us thrive. And another fundamental belief that we have is that our students are assets to our school, to our community, and we work to develop ways for students to demonstrate that they are assets in the community. We, over the last few years, have figured out ways to be able to pay students for work that they do supporting other students and other things in the community. and it really values what they are bringing and contributing to our community and to the community around Binka. So our habits of the graduate that we focus on, we've done, big retreat to decide what is it that we want our students to walk out the door with at graduation. And it's perseverance, expression, service, and ownership. Conveniently spells peso, so it can make perfect sense to many of our students for what we are trying to achieve. This year, around 520 students at Binka, 45 countries represented in our community, which is just, makes it a thrilling place to work. Walk down the hallways and hear the many languages. And students, when they reflect about what they enjoy about our school, they really like meeting kids from all over the world. And that's a real strength that we build from. Our students speak 21 languages, give or take. Sometimes we're surprised that we thought a kid only spoke 3, but actually they speak 5 languages. So hidden in that 21 might be another couple. And about 32% of our community is either SLIFE or former SLIFE, which is disproportionately large as compared to other high schools in Boston. You can see in the chart that the majority of our students speak Spanish. One real interesting demographic change over the last 8 to 10 years is the real shift from the majority of students being Dominican to a more balanced Spanish-speaking population between students from the Dominican Republic and Central American students. And right now we are in a real growth of Haitian students in the school community, whereas last year that number would have been around 10%. This year it's almost doubled to near 20% of our school community is Haitians. Our school always reflects what's happening in the community. So the short-term trends around immigration play out in real time at Binka. We have an incredible team. We have worked really hard to assemble a great team to serve our students. And about 2/3 of our staff are first or second generation immigrants themselves, which we're really proud of. It helps us connect to our students and to our families and provide so many role models in our school for our students. About 85% of us are bilingual at least. Again, that helps with communicating with families, communicating with our students. Our staff are from 17 different countries as well, so we have a really diverse community of adults. We speak 14 languages among the staff, so gratefully, we are able to speak nearly all of the languages that our students and families do, but we never quite get them all. Like Danya, I have a special point of pride in saying that we have 5 Binka graduates on our staff, which is just, amazing to see students go from being that kid who you're like, hey, can you go to class, please? And then now they are helping us run the school. So it also says something to the other students and to the families when they come to the school, when the school secretary says, yeah, this is my school. And when I say it's my school, I mean, it's the school I graduated from. Helps send a message to families and students. And, I feel like I'm following Danya's presentation a little bit. We couldn't do what we do without the partners that we have. We work really hard to develop a network of partners to support our students and our families. We're very proud to be a part of the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative, which is a group of immigrant-facing organizations that we worked to create in collaboration with the other organizations during COVID. And since then, it has grown. We're proud to be the only school so far that's a member. And then you can look at like the many other organizations that we that we partner with to do the work and try to serve our students and families. So at Binka, we're trying to get everyone ready for their next step in life. Our students are amazing and diverse, and they have a lot of different paths after high school graduation. Many of them are heading off to college. Many of them are going to other places, but to get them ready, we offer AP classes, dual enrollment. We're really proud to have a medical assisting CTE program, intensive computer technology, and then we have a broad range of electives to offer our students to explore their passions as well. Like I said, some of our students head off to four-year colleges. We're really proud of them for that. We also have many students who find that the smartest move after graduation is a two-year college. They're still developing some of their core academics, and a two-year college for free makes more sense in a situation like that. We have other students who really are looking for the shortest term earnings enhancing program that they can find. And so we help students find technical programs and vocational programs that might get them into the workforce at an increased pay rate in as little as 6 months. And then we have students who do other kind of bridge programs like Year Up and in City Year. So we're really proud that our students have landed in great places. The ones who have chosen the four-year college route have been very competitive and landed at some prestigious schools that I certainly would not have gotten into when I graduated from high school, but they're doing great. And yeah, I will pause there because I know folks are going to have questions for the panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing so much context and experience and really kind of stories of the kind of work that is happening, in our state right now. We we're really lucky to get all of that information, get all of those stories and sort of little portraits. We have just a couple minutes for questions. We're getting close to the end of our time. There was one question in the chat, which I'll read, and then if anyone else, we probably have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. So if you have a question you'd like to share, feel free to write into the chat, or you could raise your hand on Zoom. But the first question that we had already written down earlier was a question about finances, and asked, so Cam asked, how can schools afford extra teachers for content in both languages? And I heard some of our school leaders kind of mention the challenges of budgets, of that being an annual thing. And so I wonder, if anyone has thoughts about sort of funding models for dual language.
I mean, I can jump in and say for us, it's not actually having 2 teachers. We're looking, like Danya said, we're looking for that unicorn. So we're looking for one bilingual teacher who can actually teach everything in both languages, or have that flexibility to teach in both languages throughout the building, because it is highly unlikely that you will have extra positions offered to you by your school district. I also think, really growing your own. We have a pipeline here. If we have a paraprofessional who's really interested in becoming a full-time teacher, to really support them in that process, get them in to the classroom and support their development in both languages. So it is tricky, the finance part.
If I can add to that, so the language allocation can be in different forms. So like Sarah said, I too, when I was teaching, I was that one teacher who taught both in Spanish and in English. But there's also, you might have partner teachers where one is teaching in Spanish, one is teaching in English, or, other languages. I don't want to make it sound like it's only Spanish and English. It could be Portuguese and English or Vietnamese and English. But in general, districts will have the same number of positions. So if you have two teachers who are doing that as partner teachers, each one will have a homeroom that's about, 20 odd kids in each or 19 kids in each, whatever the school generally has for each of their classrooms. So you're not actually adding positions, regardless of what your language allocation plan looks like.
Great. Thank you both for sharing that. Lisa, do we have time for one more question, or do we need to wrap up?
Yeah, let's take one more.
Okay. All right. So we have one more question in the chat from Cam, who asks, how do you teach kids with he says unusual languages? I'm assuming we mean sort of like less common languages, or when you have a wide variety of languages present, versus like a program that has maybe one language focused, or a predominant one.
I think Tony's the best one to answer that question on this screen, but what I will say is that we have had students who've come to us who are not, it's not Spanish English for them. They are Haitian. Their dominant language is Haitian. Or I had a student who was from Morocco, and those students inevitably have a very strong sense of language, and they do far better than some of our kids who, because they are used to being in a bilingual environment. And so they come to it already wired to learn yet another language. This year we have one student who speaks Garifuna from Honduras. She speaks Garifuna, Spanish, English, and a little French. And she was worried about like how fast she would learn Spanish. And I was like, I think you're past all of us. So I'll leave it to Tony to answer that question. Those kids have a lot. They bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we have many, many languages at Bink, and I feel like for us, it's because we're using English as the core language of the classrooms, that might be easier in our cases. I think I heard Dr. Mudambi talk a little bit about like a virtual heritage language or something that might be an option for students to build their native language capacity even while they're in a mostly like bilingual setting.
Right. So that is something, being somebody who does speak a low incidence language as their native language. So when I entered kindergarten, I did not speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish either when I grew up in Texas. So that was a shock that there were any other languages out there for the school. But, trying to find community programs for students. So my own daughter takes a community heritage program so that she can keep up the language we speak is Tamil. Looking for those kind of programs for our schools is really important. Looking for virtual programs. There are a lot of virtual programs that are out there. So that's something that I built when I was at Framingham, so that our students who spoke some of our less common languages, or what we call low incidence languages, were able to take their language for credit. So that was actually either their world language program, or it was an additional world language program that they were taking to build their home language. So it's really important that we make sure that all of our students are able to build their language. And it's not easy. There are some languages that I couldn't find programs for. So I'm not saying it's easy, but the more we work at it, the more we're really respecting and honoring our students' identities.
Thank you. And I really appreciate ending on that note that I think has been prominent throughout this, of really seeing the strengths and assets that students bring and valuing that. I think it's a beautiful place for us to end. And so we'll pass to Lisa to close us out. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing, and for everyone attending tonight.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, Matt, about the focus on asset-based education and how this is so applicable to any kind of teaching and learning, you know, just to look at students' assets and build on those and appreciate those. So appreciate all of you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to Matt for moderating, to our interpreter, Laura, to our attendees. And there were questions about you know, building the bilingual educator pipeline. So just so happens that's the topic of our next, you know, part of this series, building the bilingual educator pipeline on Tuesday, November 12th. You'll all be receiving information about that. And I hope you'll all register and join us for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't just put in a plug to make sure you all vote. And I urge you all to vote yes on question 2, because everybody here tonight cares about English learners, and the MCAS graduation requirement is not good for them, I don't think. So vote yes on 2, and yeah, see me if you want to know how to help out in the last few days before the election. Thanks again. Really appreciate everyone.